Hello, my name is Connor Klein and I have a background in international relations from the world's most prestigious grad school on the topic, also with a specialization in the former Soviet Union. Speak fluent Ukrainian and Russian, have been living for many years on and off in Ukraine. So I'm here to give you a more nuanced and unique perspective on the Russo-Ukrainian war. So in this video, I want to react briefly to the proposed peace plan from Donald Trump, who infamously or famously boasted that he would solve the Russo-Ukrainian war on day one or within 24 hours of taking over the presidency. He is obviously now going to become the next US president, the 47th president of the United States. And the Telegraph newspaper in the United Kingdom has reported on the contours of this proposed peace plan. Now, there isn't much information. There's just the proposal, basically, broadly, that the lines of contact will be frozen. So the 20% of Ukrainian de jure territory, it's actually just a tiny bit less than 20%, that Russia now controls illegally, would basically be de facto acknowledged, maybe not de jure, that's unclear at this point. And basically there would be a line of contact that would be frozen. It's unclear whether the Ukrainian controlled territory within inside of actually Russia, which is in the Kursk Oblast, that small enclave that the Ukrainians have taken control of, would be included in that line of contact or not. But for all intents and purposes, there would be a line of contact, a demilitarized zone, and that would then be policed by European troops, not by American troops. And then Ukraine would not be allowed to join NATO. These are obviously just a few basic points. So I just want to react to that and say what I think this all means in terms of the chances of there actually being some sort of formal peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine along these lines. Now, the first thing is the devil is in the detail. I mean, does that mean that afterwards Ukraine is going to be very heavily armed? Or does it mean that it's not going to be armed? Is the country going to be rebuilt? If so, by whom? Who's going to pay for it? Is there going to be de jure or legal recognition of Russia's annexations or the areas they control, which would be Crimea and parts of Donbass, parts of Zaporizhia Oblast, and parts of, I think there's still a tiny part of Kharkiv Oblast, for example, that's under a Russian control. Kherson Oblast, there's a large chunk of. Is all that going to be recognized legally as being part of Russia, or is it going to be just left ambiguous, de facto occupied, but de jure part of Ukraine? What does this all mean in reality? Because ultimately, in order for both Russia and Ukraine to sign a peace deal, both sides would want to calculate that this deal would give them an advantage in the future for actually emerging victorious from this war. This war fundamentally is about Russia trying to seize control, either directly or indirectly, of Ukraine and stumping out its real independence from Russia. And Ukraine's objectives in terms of resisting the Russian invasion, the second invasion within a decade, is to maintain that independence and strike a path towards joining ultimately the European Union. If they could also join NATO to have proper security guarantees or more credible security guarantees, that would also be great. They would come under the US security umbrella in that case. So both sides would basically have to calculate that they would get the upper hand by signing a peace deal. Russia's already illegally invading Ukraine. They've illegally seized this territory. They habitually break agreements that they sign. If you just want to look back in recent history, they signed an agreement with Chechnya, which is part of the Russian Federation, and then they just basically ignored it once they had rebuilt their army and figured out what they did wrong in the first Chechen war, and then they came back and they stomped out that Chechen independence and installed a leadership in Grozny, in Chechnya, that was pro-Moscow, pro-Kremlin. So Russia signing the peace deal from Vladimir Putin's point of view, he wants to, number one, make sure that he can stay in power as a result of signing the agreement, and number two, that he believes he will still ultimately prevail and quash Ukrainian independence. Otherwise, why would he sign such a deal? He would only sign such a deal if he's on the point of maybe losing the war, and that would probably be due to a economic collapse in Russia, political collapse in Russia that would be impending. On the flip side, why would Volodymyr Zelensky sign such an agreement where, unless he believed that ultimately Ukraine would have a chance to emerge not just independent, but probably ultimately still have a strong possibility to regain all the occupied territories that are legally part of Ukraine that are currently under Russian occupation. If you want to look about how a long game can work with respect to that, just look at the war between, or series of conflicts between Azerbaijan and Armenia. There was a region in Azerbaijan, de jure Azerbaijan, called Nagorno-Karabakh, and it was vast majority were ethnic Armenians. There was a war in the early 90s that then became a frozen conflict, a bit like what's being proposed in this peace plan. And basically over 30 years, Azerbaijan managed to grow its military. First it grew its economy, then it grew its military, and they basically just came back and seized that territory rather quickly. And then the ethnic Armenians there fled to Armenia. So there you had the result that over 20, 30 years of building up the military, they were able to come back and seize that territory. Another example would be from the 1990s with the Balkans wars. During the Serbo-Croatian War at the beginning of the early 90s, there was a de facto independent part of Croatia that was majority Serb, called Krajina, and then later on, once the Croatian military had been rebuilt, they came and they stormed that region and took it back quite quickly. Most of the Serbs who were living there actually fled through Bosnia and presumably to Serbia ultimately. So these things can change in the long term. So the only reason for both sides, from my point of view, to sign such an agreement is if they think that the agreement will facilitate their ultimate victory. So that would require basically the different leaderships, Zelensky in Kyiv or Putin in Moscow, to fundamentally have different calculations about what the peace deal would mean in order for them to sign it. I'll leave it there. Let me know your comments down below the video. And obviously very scant information. Donald Trump has not been inaugurated yet. That's not going to happen until the second half of January, and we'll probably get a lot more information about what a potential peace deal could mean in the future and whether that is realistic. My hunch at this stage is that probably neither side will ultimately be interested in signing a peace deal that along the lines of what's been outlined, and it will come down to the blame game about who refused to sign it in terms of how presumably the new American administration under Donald Trump is going to react to that. So I'll leave it there, and do pobacenia, and see you tomorrow in the next video.